Famous Firsts of St. Louis. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. We're going to be talking today about some things that really make St. Louis stand out historically, I think. Diane Rademacher has written the book, Famous Firsts of St. Louis, a celebration of facts, figures, food, and fun. Diane, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I should say welcome back to the program.
Oh,
It's
yes.
been how long?
10 years.
Have I been doing this show this long?
I imagine you have. I was here 10 years ago with a prior book.
You did a book, Still Shining, that was about the 1904 World's Fair here in St. Louis, which came out about a decade ago, and you were here to talk about it then.
Yeah, that's
Why
good.
has it been 10 years since you wrote a book?
Oh my, many things have happened in the interim.
They take time too, don't they?
Yes, indeed. I retired and got this idea for this new book about 4 years ago. During a trip to Boston, in fact. We were on the duck boats, and all around the inside of the duck boat it said Boston, first in this, first in that. And when I got back here to St. Louis, I applied for a government contract job and had to have my fingerprints taken again. And when I was sent at the police department, something bubbled up in the back of my mind. Like, well, didn't I hear that St. Louis was the first to use fingerprints in the nation? And sure enough, from the 1904 World's Fair, there was a gentleman that came over from England, was actually a policeman, and his job was to guard Queen Victoria's Jubilee gifts, but also to teach fingerprinting in the United States. And so our police department picked up on that, and we became the first in the nation to use fingerprinting.
So you thought, what else has happened here first?
Exactly, and so those two ideas from Boston and St. Louis merged together, and through a lot of research, I found lots of things that happened first in St. Louis in all aspects of life. Education, entertainment, sports, media, business, kind of covers it all.
Yeah, and you've grouped it that way in your book.
I have,
in categories.
Yes.
Ron Ells, who's known on the radio as Johnny Rabbit,
Yes.
on KMOX and other places in the past, helped you put together this book with Mound City Publishing, which
Correct.
is his deal, I guess, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And, Ron is famous for his trivia. He's written trivia books, and he does a lot of trivia nights. And he says, anyway, in the foreword to your book, that this book is going to be invaluable to trivia buffs. And I guess it would be.
I would think some of the items, in fact, I was at a trivia night. I like to attend those. And there were some questions, and either someone had read the book, or either they're just things that people thought would be of interest, but they were easy to answer.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that you point out in your book, Famous Firsts of St. Louis. And let's look at this image now, which is of a cow. Now, the first cow was not in St. Louis, so that can't be it.
No, but the first cow to fly in an airplane came to St. Louis. It was February 18th, 1930. There was an air expo at the arena, and apparently dairymen decided that they would, for publicity purposes and maybe even scientific purposes too, fly a cow from Bismarck, Missouri, about 70 miles away, to St. Louis for this air expo that was at the arena. And you know, the arena was designed to be a place to have dairy shows, but in 1930 was the Air Expo site. So they loaded this cow onto this tri-motored airplane, and in flight they milked Nellie, a Guernsey, and when they got near the arena, they had actually put the milk in little cartons and attached small parachutes to the cartons.
No kidding.
And dropped them in the vicinity of the arena. And this is all reported in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. And in fact, I visited Bismarck, and they verified, the fact that this happened.
Got milk?
Got milk,
Right.
exactly. And then the story was picked up in Middleton, Wisconsin by the National Mustard Museum. The curator there is quite an interesting guy, and he decided that he would take this story a little further. He's embellished it quite a bit. But the National Mustard Museum actually celebrates what they call Elm Farm Ollie Day. They renamed the cow on February 18th every year, and they have a special mustard named
My birthday.
for the cow.
I feel honored. That's my birthday. And I didn't know there was a National Mustard Museum.
There is, yes, indeed.
Let's look at this next image from the book. And here we have a pair of dentures. Now, you're not saying the first dentures were made in St. Louis?
Well, these aren't really dentures. This is from the American Association of Orthodontics. Actually, the first dental specialty in dentistry is orthodontics, and the first dental specialist was right here in St. Louis. His name was Edward Engel, and he actually moved here from Chicago and started a dental practice where he specialized in orthodontics. And then he started the first postgraduate school in orthodontics in 1900, and it was called the Engel School of Orthodontia. And then in 1901, he established the American Association of Orthodontics, which today has 17,000 members. It's headquartered here in St. Louis. And there's also the largest orthodontics library here in town. It's the Charles Baker Memorial Library out on Lindbergh, and they process thousands of requests every year for information in their holdings.
Wow. Our next image has to do with billiards.
Yes. Picture of the gentleman, that is Ernst Schmitz, and he came here in 1850 from Germany, and he was quite an accomplished cabinet maker, but he also was proficient with ivory, and so he made billiard balls and 10 pins. In 1882, he and his son started building billiard tables, and in 1920, his son Oscar decided to name the company after his wife, Anna Elizabeth, so the name of the company, A.E. Schmidt. And so the company is the largest and oldest family-owned billiard table manufacturer in the nation.
The next image we have is one of St. Louis's water towers. Now this is true, Diane, isn't it, that we have, is it 2 or 3 historic water towers in St. Louis, and there aren't that many in the country?
Well, what I've read, we have 3, and there's 7 left in the country.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
This is the one on North Grand, right?
Right. This is the Grand Water Tower, and it was built in 1871 in order to stabilize water pressure. Apparently, these steam pumps produced a lot of surges in the water mains and pipes, and so the idea was, at the time, the engineers developed these standpipes, and the water was in the column, and it pressurized or equalized the pressure then throughout the mains and the water pipes. But the columns were ugly, so it was up to the architect then to make it something beautiful. So George Barnett, a local architect, designed the exterior, the covering for the standpipe, which is this Corinthian column, which is known to be the largest in the world, and some say the most perfect Corinthian column of its size, 154 feet tall. And it was taken out of commission about 40 years later, and then in the 20s and 30s, signal lights were attached to the top of it as guide lights to Lambert Field.
Really?
Yes, and then in the 1970s, it was designated a National Historic Site.
Diane, you've got such a range of famous firsts of St. Louis in this book. How'd you go about finding them?
Well, through a lot of reading, a lot of research.
Was it easy?
Well, actually, a lot of listening, newspapers. In 3 years' time, I scoured many, many books on St. Louis. Actually, the public library has some listings of things that happened in St. Louis first, but no stories, so I needed to do research to embellish upon those listings. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but I think that I've identified some that are very unique and interesting, some that people know, and some that people, I think, will discover for the first time.
Because how many firsts are in this book, approximately?
159.
And you think you might have missed some?
Oh, I think so.
Let's look at 2 more pictures. These are from the Muni. So
Yes.
what record does a Muni hold for being a first of something? And this is, I guess, the site before the structure that we now know.
Right. Well, the Muni, it's the largest and oldest municipal theater for musicals in the country. And it also has a very large stage. In fact, the turntable, which was used to change scenes rapidly because the stage is so large, was the largest of its kind when it was constructed.
Let's go to the next shot here.
Okay.
What's that?
Yes, well, the Muni's first production in 1919, after it had been, established as the Municipal Theater Association of St. Louis, was Robin Hood, and this is Mayor Keel, and he's playing King Richard in the play. because he was very, supportive
Right.
of the idea.
Well, he was instrumental in having the Muni here, wasn't he?
Yes,
Eric
I
Keel?
think, yes.
Yeah. This next shot is of an airplane.
Yes, in 1910, there was a Air Expo here in St. Louis at Kinloch Field, and Theodore Roosevelt, he was also going to be visiting in town. So the pilot there on the right is Arch Hoxsey, and he invited President Roosevelt to fly with him. At first, Roosevelt said no, but he did show up at the airfield, and he was convinced by Arch Hoxsey to fly. And so they went for a 3-minute flight above Kinloch Field, which is near, the site is near present-day Lambert St. Louis International Airport. And there were about 30,000 people below that watched, the event. There's actually a Library of Congress film that recaps that.
Well, before we take our break, we have 2 pictures here from your book, and they have to do with, well, not just St. Louis's favorite pastime, but America's too, I guess, baseball.
Yes.
So let's take a look at that first one.
Okay.
Who's that?
This gentleman is Bill Doak, and he was a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals in 1919. And what he did, he redesigned the mitt. In the past, it was just used for hand protection, but what he did, he made it a defensive mitt by putting lacing between the thumb and the forefinger. And he had this design patented because it developed a trap to catch the ball.
And there we have the original design, I guess?
Yes, this is the original patent design from 1922. And as I say, he pitched this design then to the Rawlings Sporting Goods Company, and they manufactured the Doak mitt until 1953.
We're talking with Diane Rademacher about her book, Famous First of St. Louis, and we'll have more after this break, so stay with us. We'll be right back. So.
Can I-
Kids will spend 15 minutes watching online videos like this one.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes twice a day. They have the time.
Experience St. Louis!
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
The odds of this daughter of a clergyman spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Our guest today is Diane Rademacher. I first met Diane about a decade ago when she wrote Still Shining, a book about the 1904 World's Fair. And she's back with Famous Firsts of St. Louis, a celebration of facts, figures, food, and fun. And Diane, you had a long career with the National Archives, with the, what they call it, the Record Center here in St. Louis?
The National Personnel Record Center.
Right.
Correct.
That sounds like you'd have to be good at like keeping files and keeping things in order. Did that background help you at all in compiling this book?
Oh, probably not. I worked on
No?
large computer systems, actually. We designed, developed, taught, and trained computer operations. And
But you have been, you grew up here,
applications.
you're a native St. Louisan,
Yes.
and I understand that you had been interested in St. Louis history ever since high school.
Well, that's true. I was just always a history buff, like the World's Fair. My dad was actually born in 1904.
Really?
And was a history major in college. Always seemed to be my best subject, and so it's just, I guess, a natural progression. Worked for the National Archives, except, as I said, I worked on computer systems, but still had a little bit of association with, the records and the history that they contained. Had to
So what you did is you compiled this book of things that either were invented here or things that happened here for the first time, and they're,
correct.
what'd you say, a couple hundred or?
159, I
Yeah.
believe.
Did
Yes.
anything surprise you?
Well, there was one item that I thought was really interesting. It was the junior dress size. That was actually an innovation here in St. Louis by a gentleman from Klein's department store. He was, I believe, the merchandising manager, and he thought that young women would buy dresses that were designed to fit their figures and that were more youthful in appearance. And so he challenged the students at Washington University to create, younger-looking designs, and that became a very large industry here in St. Louis in the 1940s and 50s. At one time, I read that there were 250 dress manufacturers. I'm sure that some were quite small, but had an industry here. We had all the fashion magazines that would come for runway displays, and I just never knew that.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Yeah, and the dress sizing was determined by measuring Washington U students. So.
No kidding. Wow. Let's look at this next picture from your book. And this is an organization that's functioning today. It's called Wings of Hope.
Yes, Wings of Hope. This has an interesting history. There were 4 businessmen who liked to play cards, who also had an interest in aviation. And in 1960, they found out about a nurse in Kenya who had an airplane that she used to deliver medical supplies and support to women and children in the desert, the remote desert regions. And she had this old plane that had a fabric covering, and holes were being licked into it by animals, and so it wasn't airworthy anymore. And so they heard about this and decided that they were going to help, and so they refurbished a metal Cessna plane and sent that to her 2 years later with a lot of supplies so that she could continue her work. And then other groups asked for assistance, and so that began Wings of Hope, which is the largest and oldest aviation-based humanitarian charity in the world.
Famous first of St. Louis. Well, Diane, in the first segment, we talked a little bit about baseball. Let's get back to that. A couple of years ago, I interviewed the author of a book. I think it was called The First Lady of Baseball. I hope I've got that right.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
But we've got 2 pictures here from days gone by. I think this is an early baseball league, I guess, in St. Louis. Let's take a look at that.
Okay, I think these are the National League owners.
National League owners.
Right.
But what stands out is there's a woman there.
Yes, that's Helene Robeson Britton, and she inherited the St. Louis Cardinal baseball franchise that her father and her uncle had purchased in 1899. She inherited it in 1911 after they were both, her uncle and father were both deceased. And so the fraternity of baseball owners probably thought that she wasn't going to take an active role, but she surprised them. And she was very active in, running the club. She was the president for a while. She, would attend the meetings of the National League owners. And actually, the Cardinals fared better under her ownership than they had since they became a team in 1892.
What's interesting about that story is that how unusual that was for the time.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember the interview I did. It was a long time ago. But I think at that time, like, women didn't even go to baseball games that much.
Well, perhaps not, although I do have a picture of her attending a baseball game. So she was there with her kids. And so
But it
she
raised a lot of
surprised
eyebrows,
everyone.
what's a woman doing running a baseball team? And
Yes,
like you said,
exactly.
everybody thought she was, after she inherited it, that she'd just pass it on, but she didn't.
She did not. She ran the team for about 6 years, and then she sold it in 1918.
All right, we have a building here. I think this is a church. You'll have to tell me.
Oh, this is St. John's Methodist Church. It's on Kings Highway in Washington. And this was the site of the marriage of the first vice president in office, and that was Alvin Barkley back in 1949, and he married a St. Louis and Jane Hadley. They had met in 1949 in July in Washington, D.C., had a 4-month courtship and married in October. Alvin Barkley was 71 and Jane Hadley was 38. So I said their May-December courtship was really a July-October courtship.
And speaking of presidents, let's move on to this next shot, and we have Harry S. Truman, of course, a Missouri native and former president of the United States.
Yes, well, there he is with Alvin Barkley and Jane Hadley, the couple that was married here in St. Louis.
Let's move to the next shot.
Yes, and this is another surprise for me. I never realized that we had a first lady born here in St. Louis. And so this is our first lady. This is Julia Dent Grant, and she was born at Whitehaven Plantation in St. Louis County, and now that's a National Historic Site. And she always dreamt of marrying a dashing, gallant young soldier, which she did in 1844. She married Ulysses S. Grant, or she met him in 1844 and married in 1848. And so together, you know, they went through a life of triumph and tragedy. And Grant, after serving in the Civil War as a general, he was elected to the presidency. And
I think we've got 3 more shots of maybe a couple of Grant, and I think finally they're home. Let's take a look at those.
yes, in 1860.
Who's that?
That's Grant and Ulysses Grant and Julia Dent Grant and one of their children. And there's the general.
General Grant.
Yes.
And then I believe we have their home.
Yes, and this is Whitehaven. And Julia Dent Grant is also the first lady to write her memoirs. And the interesting thing about that is that they were not published until 1975, even though she wrote
why?
them. I don't know, but that's when they appeared.
So is that where Grant's Farm is now, what we call Grant's Farm?
It's actually across the road. It's a National Historic Site. It's on I guess that would be on the north side of Grant's Farm.
In your research, Diane, I mean, most of the things that you've dealt with in your book Famous First of St. Louis, are historical events. Some of them are more current, though. So did you ever have any personal contact with someone directly related to a subject in your book?
I did. Diane White, who was the former
TV personality.
TV personality, weathercaster. She was the first African-American weathercaster in the nation.
Really?
Yes, and so I was able to chat with her, and we had we had a couple meetings. Obtained a more recent picture of her, and so she's in the book.
What did she share with you about, breaking that ceiling? Glass ceiling.
Yes, I guess we really didn't go into that much, but she did comment on how, in her career that she enjoyed especially going down to spring training and interviewing the St. Louis Cardinals from a woman's perspective, which was probably also kind of shattering because in those days, most women weren't reporting sports. They were just reporting the news or the weather.
Right, yeah. Let's look at 2 more images from your book, and these are images of can openers. Now, what's the connection to St. Louis with can openers?
Well, this is a swing-away Model 407 can opener that probably many St. Louisans have right in their kitchens. I have one in mine. And this particular,
Right, who doesn't? Yeah.
This particular, there were over 100 million of these manufactured, and they were manufactured in South St. Louis. But the unique thing is that this can opener went aboard Skylab, and it's supposedly the first can opener in outer space, and it was manufactured, not this particular one that's shown, but one like it was the first one in outer space, and so St. Louis also has that claim to fame.
I think we have another shot of it, don't we?
There it is,
There we
yes,
go.
with Skylab.
Yeah, not much has changed. It looks just like the one I have in my drawer.
They were almost indestructible.
I think so. I've had mine for about 20 years.
Yeah.
The first mobile phone, the next shot. The first mobile phone?
Well, it was the first commercial mobile phone, car phone, and that was 1946, and the Monsanto Chemical Company and the Henry Perkison Building Contractor Company, they had mobile phones installed in their company cars, and there was an 80-pound transmitting unit that you have to put in the trunk and a rooftop antenna, and calls could be made through an operator. And actually, it was through Southwestern Bell's network that the calls could be initiated. But there wasn't much bandwidth, I believe, and so oftentimes people would have to wait in order to make a call.
And that was in 1940s, late 40s.
That was
you said.
1946.
That's amazing, because I can remember even in the 70s, I didn't know anybody with a car phone. It was really considered really sort of elite.
Yes.
Back
Well,
then.
well, this was more like they said, it was sort of like walkie-talkie, except that you could communicate over a distance rather than just, like a police car could, communicate with the headquarters. But this, you could connect through the network and, talk to anyone who they could connect through the network.
The final two pictures we have from your book involve the Pope in St. Louis.
Yes, and January 27th, 1999, the largest gathering to participate in a mass was here in St. Louis, 110,000 people under the rooftops at the TWA Dome. And Pope John Paul II came here for a papal visit. That was actually quite a unique event.
Well, for all the things we've talked about today, Diane, there's still tons and tons of more famous firsts in St. Louis in your book. Everything from Ready Whip to Tums to the Radio City Rockettes, and we won't even go into details. People should check it out. It's Famous Firsts of St. Louis, a celebration of facts, figures, food, and fun, and it's available, I guess, at most bookstores?
It's at about 40 plus locations around town. History Museum is a great place to locate.
Diane Rademacher, it's been 10 years since your last book. We'll see you in another decade, maybe? Or?
Maybe.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. It was fun. I'm Steve Potter. That's all we have time for this edition of City Corner. Thanks for watching. Bye.